Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scary Stories We Tell. We are your hosts, Chris.
And Emma, that's me.
I'd hope so. I would hope so. And hey, everybody, on this episode of Scary Stories We Tell, we're going to be talking about something that we haven't talked about before. We're going to be talking about a little movie, though, at the same time, because we're going to be doing another one of these real talks where we talk about the movie, but we also talk about the events surrounding the movie, or the events, in this case, purported to take place in conjunction with the events that are being portrayed on screen. On this episode, we're going to be talking the 1975 case of Travis Walton, which would then inspire the 1993 film aptly titled Fire in the Sky. So, Emma, before we talk about the Travis Walton case, which we also watched the movie Fire in the Sky together, before we kind of looked into the case, you had never heard of this before, yeah?
No, I have not. Most definitely not.
But because we haven't really talked about it a lot on the show, I figured this is a good way to open up the episode, opening salvo, as it were. How do you feel about the belief in extraterrestrials? And sidebar, if you have strong feelings on it, which I'm sure you may have some feelings, where or what are those rooted in?
Okay. My stance, I think, is similar to a lot of people in, the general scientific community, which is just, it seems illogical that we're the only sentient beings that have created some form of a society in the vast universe. I feel like that's pretty safe to say. The odds of us being the only ones out here is very, very low. I think it's more than possible that there could be intelligent life somewhere else, if not tons of intelligent life somewhere else. I don't feel comfortable saying one way or another, but I feel like it's pretty safe to assume that we are probably not alone. And I think that a lot of people share that same sentiment. Pretty lukewarm take, if you ask me.
I don't think it's lukewarm. I think it's a take that most people would agree with.
Not a very hot take.
I mean, what hot take can you offer in 2023? Hey, let me break it down for you really fast. Like, here's my thoughts on aliens that you haven't heard before. Like, well, that's the thing. Like, in a lot of ways, like, it's old trodden ground. Like, even if we talk about this case that, I know about and I brought to you and you had never heard of, like, the Travis Walton case is old trodden ground. I mean, they released a documentary on Discovery Plus, I want to say either this year or last year, because it's pretty recent. And I was one of the things I watched to prepare for this episode. But I mean, this case had a movie made out of it. Like, how unknown is it really? Like, it's probably unknown now more so than it used to be, only because, again, like, it's from the 70s. Like, it's not, I mean, and again, like, I don't even know, like, do you know about Roswell? Like, how far does your alien knowledge go? Like, is it cursory? Like, what are we thinking?
I feel like I've heard Roswell thrown around.
So you don't know what you kind of are. Okay, interesting. This is an interesting kind of line, though, because this is one of the directions that I bring to the show that is kind of a blind spot. That's interesting because, like, you brought stuff to the show that was a blind spot for me, like manifestations and tarot and astrology. So, like, it's interesting because, like, this was the stuff I was into as a kid.
Yeah,
like aliens and
occult.
More like aliens and cryptid stuff. Like, I was really into, like, I still am. Like, Bigfoot is definitely, I have Bigfoot stuff. Like, I have a giant Bigfoot, like, metal sculpture in my backyard that my parents bought for me for my birthday last year, the year before. Jess has bought me, who's another host of the show, has bought me Bigfoot stuff for my birthday before. Like, I have a Squatchin hat that a buddy of mine bought me for my birthday. Like, Bigfoot is my jam. But if I were to say there's a close second, for sure, it's aliens. Like, no questions asked. Like, aliens are something that has interested me since I was a kid, to the point where I pestered my parents to go to Roswell.
Really?
We had to go there when we went to, I think we went to Vegas when I was a kid, when I was like 8 or 9. And I was like, we have to go to Roswell. If we're going that way, can we go to Roswell? And then we went on go out with someone and they're going to take you to where the saucer supposedly crashed. And there was like a giant rock that was like cleaved in two. And he was like, this is where this, who knows if it was fucking real? Like, it could have just been a fucking hokum bullshit, like Blair Witch Right, for the tourists. Yeah, like, oh, a bunch of fucking idiot tourists, $200, for fucking 4 people to go out, $50 a person, make $200 and show them a rock broken in half. And they're, oh, wow. So it could be that, but I distinctly remember that as a kid. And like aliens for me were definitely they were my jam. And in a lot, like I said, in a lot of ways still are. So
what is your stance on us being visited in history? Because I feel like that's something that people bring up a lot, when people talk about like origins of religion or, like who built the pyramids, etc. Like, I feel like that's come up a lot in at least a lot of like the documentaries and theories. What is your stance on aliens in human history?
Thinking like Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
Great show. I mean, I don't know how I feel about the show. Have you ever seen the show? I'm sure you've seen it, right? Ancient Aliens. It's been on for like 15 seasons on the History Channel. It's insane. It's like,
I've probably caught glimpses of it, but I haven't turned on a TV in ages.
That's fair. I mean, it's literally just like, we have an episode about the pyramids, and here's some weird things about the pyramids that maybe don't add up.
I must have.
It's all based off of a book written by Eric von Daniken called Chariots of the Gods, where he, through some bad evidence and also evidence possibly presented by a Nazi or Aryan sympathizer.
Interesting.
Known after the fact, obviously. Eric von Daniken is not a Nazi, but again, people you work with don't necessarily not reflect you in a way. But that book was kind of one of the early things that was positing maybe there was a extraterrestrial hand in the creation of things like religions, like you were mentioning, like pyramids, like big, like, quote, wonders of the world, like created by extraterrestrial forces, like the people who lived in Derinkuyu, which is an underground Turkish settlement. They were underground, and the show posits that they were underground because the aliens were attacking them if they went outside. Look,
interesting.
I don't know why people would live underground in Turkey versus living above ground. Maybe it was the aliens. I don't know, because I can't go back in time and tell you, and nobody can, but that doesn't mean that there aren't, scientists who do their research and make pretty good suppositions about things. But, I think it's in an interesting spot where I think it's ridiculous to think we haven't been. And Jess mentions this when we did our Haunted Hawaii episode, where we talk about pre and post colonization myths, because there's a cryptid in Hawaii that only showed up after the colonizers showed up. And so I wonder how many of our creation myths or other myths about creatures and gods are tied to people in ancient times being visited by aliens under the guise of gods, quote unquote. Because like if Zeus is interacting with people, might have been just like an alien walking around because he could do things they couldn't understand. Like, I don't know why that would be so hard to believe unless we're not assuming that they're literally interacting with the gods. And again, they're just having fanciful dialogues in romantic text, but it doesn't necessarily feel that way. It feels like they were communing with the gods in a more direct way than we do now.
Right.
And like, how do you feel about it, I guess?
I feel like I don't know enough to say like I think because of this reason, but like
wait, are you saying my reasoning is somehow sound?
More sound than what I feel like
That's
I'm about
fair,
to say.
but I mean, again, like anyone who is a quote scientist might look at what I said and say, well, let me tell you something. So the moment you say I believe in this stuff, you kind of lower yourself in people's eyes immediately. That's a problem in and of itself, obviously.
Right. I think that it is definitely a possibility. If at some point we can confirm that we have been visited in, the past 20, 30 years, I don't see why it's impossible to say that we were visited a lot, way further back. Something that was coming up while I was doing some research is a lot of people assume, that aliens evolved or could have evolved at like in the same timeline that we have, and they just happen to be more advanced. But if they're so much more advanced, it makes sense that they've been around a lot longer than we have. So
very humanocentric way of viewing things.
Of
like
course. And also the sun revolves around the earth.
Right. Well, and I view aliens in a very humanless like existence. Like our existence is not dependent on theirs and vice versa. So to think like, maybe they were evolving at the same time as us, but like that's idiotic. Like there's millions of years on either side of us. Like,
right.
Like, and who knows the technology that they have? Who knows if it's even our dimension? Like, again, there's a question of dimensionality to this. Are aliens actually of our dimension, or are they just traveling as opposed to through space, through time? Like, how is that any less valid of a reasoning? Like,
of course, literally, when you bring this stuff up, anything is possible. It's the same way that when, ghosts are brought up, we don't know anything, so anything could be possible. A lot of it is conjecture and circumstantial evidence. And because of that, we can come to just about any conclusion. So I think with anything in the occult realm, it's very easy to say, well, this could have happened or that could have happened. And I think all of those theories are equally valid to an extent.
So we come to the case of Travis Walton. So our good old friend Travis, who, by the way, I always want to put this out here, and I haven't tried to do it yet, but I'm going to. And there's another person that I'm going to be reaching out to this year as well to try to speak with. I would love to speak with Travis Walton, genuinely. And we know that he does podcasts because he was on a certain other podcast of a certain other person whose name we won't mention because that person's podcast is big enough and they don't need us saying their name on our show. So I won't. But he's been on there. So I know we watched some of that interview together. And again, we did our own separate research. But our good friend Travis Walton got abducted in 1975, November 5th to be exact. 2 days before Election Day, he was abducted and he went missing for 5 days and 6 hours. And then he mysteriously showed back up, and this all happened in the most exciting place in the world, Northeast Arizona, Snowflake, Arizona, where they're logging because Travis Walton was a logger. So Emma, I've set it up a little bit, but what do we want to talk about with the Travis Walton case specifically? Besides what I set up, what other pieces of information are we missing here to further flesh out the narrative of Mr. Travis Walton?
Good question. And I think it's really important to note that a lot of this case and the movie, the story as a whole, revolves around the fact that Travis, was in a group of friends, and that group of friends, honestly, the majority of the movie centers around that group of friends and their reaction to all of this happening. And I can only assume that meant that they were very integral in the actual case. So I think that's important to note. So I believe in the movie there were 6 of them, but I think I read somewhere that there were 7.
There were 6.
There were 6?
There were 6, yeah.
So one of them was a convicted felon, but they were all like just loggers, and they were all on the same, they were all doing the same project, the same job.
Yeah.
At the time that this was happening. And so, they were all out in the woods at the same time when this all went down. So I think that's important to note.
Yeah, this is not a case of one person went into the woods and was abducted and showed up a week later. The 6 of them go out into the woods. Mike Rogers, Alan Dallas, David Whitlock, Greg Hayes, and Bobby Cogdill, and Travis Walton, obviously. They go out into the woods together. Alan Dallas is the one that you're talking about, the one that has the kind of a shady history. If you go and watch the documentary that Discovery Plus did, they talk about it there as well. But he had a quote, shady history, and he was kind of a local known troublemaker. Again, as much as you could be in the 70s. You're probably drunk, getting into bar fights. I mean, again, still someone who clearly went out and worked with these people. They mentioned that they're loggers. You can't be drunk while logging. It's dangerous fucking work. Like, it's genuinely dangerous work. So these 6 dudes are out there, and on this evening, they encounter a light in the sky, bright light in the sky. And this is the first part here that I want to bring up to you. And I think it's the part of the story that maybe it's not that I don't have a problem with it. It's just I have a hard time understanding it. On the night of November 5th in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, these 6 guys are driving along and they see a light in the sky and they stop the car near the lights. And what happens, Emma? This is something I have a really hard time understanding still.
A very specific one of them gets out of the car and approaches.
Travis Walton gets out of the car and goes and stands effectively the way they're describing it, the way it's portrayed in the movie. And yes, I know the movie is not factually correct because they made his abduction a lot more exciting, at least the alien autopsy part's a lot more exciting than the way he describes it the multiple times I've heard, as I'm sure you did. But he gets out of the car of his own volition and goes and stands under the UFO and looks up at it.
Which I remember as we were watching it, we were both very verbally expressing how stupid we thought that was, as were everybody else that were, in the car at the time saying, "Get back here. What the fuck are you doing? Why are you standing there? Why? Why did you leave? Why?" And apparently, just about everything that I had seen, I keep hearing the word entranced and curious, but I think one thing was it was opportunity of a lifetime, curiosity would never be sated. And I get it, but also no.
If we're looking at it from that angle, and I'm okay, here's the question. Put yourself in the position, right? Are you telling someone to let me out? I want to go look at it.
No.
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds though. If you're describing it that way, and it's I'll never get this chance again. I don't know though. If you do look at it that way, that it doesn't. I'm not saying it makes sense, but you are not going to get that opportunity again.
I think your background of being fascinated with aliens, backs up your being of two minds. I think it's cool. Yeah. But at the same time, I value self-preservation, and my instincts of not fucking getting out of the vehicle would keep me firmly rooted. I think I'd be pressed up against, the glass of the window. I would be looking at it and saying what the fuck over and over, but I wouldn't get out. I would lock the goddamn door and I'd be like, "We need to leave. What the fuck is that? We need to get out of here."
So that's what his friends do. His friends. So there's something I want to point out here. So they do see a saucer as a saucer-shaped object. So this is them saying what I could only describe to be, and Travis Walton describes it because I think he talks about when he speaks to that podcast interview. He talks about what is effectively Bob Lazar's image of a UFO, which is now more or less the commonly accepted UFO, which is what he claims they were working on and had at Area 51. But they see a saucer-shaped object, and for whatever reason, it shoots down a light, and they see it happen. It shoots down a light, and it concusses him to the ground and knocks him down. And they show this in the movie, and it's pretty dramatic. He gets, it's he's getting hit with a wave of energy so hard that it knocks him off his feet. And then what happens? What do his friends do? He's maybe not friends. Again, question becomes, are people doing this to you, your friends? But what does this group of loggers that he's out there with do after he gets knocked down?
Well, apparently, from their accounts, they assumed after this blast, because he apparently had been blasted backwards a few feet, landed pretty harshly on the ground, and looked pretty fucked up. They just assumed he died instantly. And they were like, "Fuck this." And they all left him there for dead. Really good friends should.
Yeah, here's the thing. They're not his friends, right?
And that I did notice while doing my research, and I saw that come up a lot. They were working on the same project. They were, effectively contractors together, but that did not make them friends, unlike what the movie would lead you to believe.
And Travis Walton married Mike Rogers' sister. So Mike Rogers and Travis Walton knew each other, and they show that in the movie. where, played by Robert Patrick, otherwise known as the T-1000, he goes and he's like, we got to turn around. We got to go back. We got to save him. And he goes back to save Travis because, again, Travis is dating his sister. Mm-hmm. And he's gone. And then the movie spends another 30 minutes on this because the movie has enough. See, that's honestly the thing that's maybe the bigger issue here is the movie is more about the way the rest of the 5 people were treated, which is something we're going to talk about, but it doesn't have anything to do with aliens. Like, it has to do with something else that's just as interesting in a lot of ways, because this case, I feel like we could have entered this in a different direction the way the movie does, because the movie enters this as like a true crime story.
It does. One thing I do want to note from what I found in my research is that apparently, so in the movie, only Mike goes back. But apparently that wasn't the case, and all of them went back to look for him immediately. So I think that that's important to note, even though they weren't friends, which in the movie they would lead you to believe, they were really shitty friends, worse than apparently real life. So I think that's an interesting thing to note. I don't know why. I guess for the drama of it, they did that for the movie.
Well, it's because, again, like, the connection to him makes it more personal that he's the only one that it's right. I mean, again, like, I think my issue overall is the movie does a bad job in telling it tells the story of everybody else and Travis Walton. And I think that, and again, I get it, because the part of the story is, and this is where the public would have entered it, is this guy is missing. Right. And they saw aliens. Like, that's the entry point here for the story in the movie is these 5 dudes are sitting in this bar, and here comes James Garner of all people. And James Garner goes, "You boys, your friend's missing, eh? Tell me what happened." And they're like, "You wouldn't believe us if we told you." And then they tell their story about, the aliens and da-da-da-da-da-da. And you know what? Shocker. They don't fucking believe them. And they didn't believe them in real life either. They're like, "You guys fucking murdered him," which is like, I want to ask you, like, what did you think about that? Like that, and like, if you watch any of these documentaries or do any research, like, this was not like, "Oh, we think you guys went out there and you killed him." Like, no, they were like, "You fucking murdered this guy, right? Like, where's his body? Somebody murdered him and you're going to have to tell us." Like, they thought he was fucking dead.
My stance on that is that it's not that hard to believe. I think at the time, men were often seen as creatures of instinct, which I think you and I both know is very stupid and dismissive. But at the time, I think like men around that age, like in their 20s, were often seen as creatures of instinct, very quick to anger, and it's very plausible that one of them got into a fight with another and it just went a little too far. And then because they were witnesses, they were all like, "We just got to cover it up." Like, I could see why that would be the thought process.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's funny to me because you would think it's like, they killed him. It's like, no, they're like, you're all going to jail. One of you killed him and you're all covering it up. Like, because again, like, what is the other option? You have to believe something. And that's the thing here. Like, you have to believe something that's, again, we've all been told is frankly unbelievable. Like, you have to believe that Travis Walton got abducted. What is the other option? That they're all making this up? Like, that for me is the problem here, because there are 5 people here. It's the 5 people who have no reason to lie that confounds me in this whole thing. It's not Travis Walton's part of it. It's those 5 people who are what, covering for him? Like,
yes. And that's something that I did actually have in my notes, is that despite not being friends, they all stuck to the same story, which would be to cover, but for why? Like, what is the reason? And obviously, if they didn't actually kill him, which they didn't, which is pretty clear since the man is still alive.
Right.
Or is he?
What if he's an alien replacement? They actually killed him and then the aliens dropped off a clone and they're all just like, "Wait, we killed that guy."
That's an interesting theory.
Well, so here's an alternate theory before we get to the Travis has come back part of the story. I want to just focus on this moment here because I think it's a moment worth talking about. The moment of Travis is gone. You have 5 people who There were 6 when they went out. There are 5 now. Someone is missing. Travis Walton is missing. He's been missing for, let's say, day 2, right? Not day 1, whatever. He fucked off and he can't be found. Day 2, day 3. This guy's gone. Okay. If it's not the UFOs and they didn't kill him, then what explanation is there for where Travis Walton is for 5 days? That's all I want to know what your thoughts are. If we say it can't be aliens, but he does come back somehow, because again, he is gone for 5 days. Incontrovertible proof he's gone for 5 days. What is it then if it's not aliens or it's not the aliens story that he's telling?
So something that I saw quite a bit during my research, apparently both Travis and Mike were known to do acid. And also, Travis was a known liar. That's what I found during my research. All conjecture. I can't necessarily back it up. But while I was doing
allegedly,
he was a known liar. And someone in the group, I forgot if they said who, but someone in the group also was like a pretty well-known dealer of LSD. So, in my opinion, it had to do with, it could have been an elaborate cover-up for the 6 of them for having a reason. Apparently there was an issue with their logging contract. They were apparently really far behind in their logging contract. And, maybe they all did some LSD together and they came up with this amazing story as to why they were so behind to get out of their, contract. And, maybe he ran off for a little too long. I've never done LSD myself, and I couldn't tell you why that would be the order of events, but I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that this group of people would come up with an elaborate story to get out of something, especially if one of them is a known liar and others of them also partake in hallucinogenics often and could come up with something quite fantastical because of it.
Is it fantastical, though, is my question.
I think it's relatively fantastical for the time.
You think so?
I think so. And one other thing that I could not find another source that said this. So again, allegedly, but what I did find,
it's going to be the allegedly episode.
Listen.
I mean, again, this Travis Walton's still alive. I'd love to speak with him one-on-one. So it is all allegedly. Right.
Apparently, the group submitted the story to a science fiction contest where the prize was $5,000 and they split it amongst the six of them to make up for the money that they lost on the logging contract. I couldn't find another source that backed that up. I couldn't find any record of it. I did try to do a little deeper digging into that. So if somebody else has something else to back that up, that would be amazing. But if that's to be believed, I think they realized along the way that they could make money off of a story like this. They were in a job that made them a bunch of nobodies. And they wanted to be somebody's.
I have a problem with this line of reasoning, though, because this line of reasoning gets used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They got run out of town. Like, if you watch the documentary, maybe they're bullshitting. Again, like,
I never said they were smart.
No, but like...
Do 20-something-year-old men, especially at that time, understand the consequences of their actions?
I think if you're saying that they want to pretend that they're aliens to get all this money and do all this stuff, then I feel like they have to. You can't be stupid. Stupid people aren't making up that aliens are around, because the stupid people that are making up that aliens are around don't get any further than I saw an alien. The people that are smart, or at least grifters, are the people that make it up, stick to it, and then milk it for all it's worth. I don't see that here. Do you know, like, I don't see that here. They might have been bullshitting, but it's not like they're all millionaires now and they're all living on the good, the milk and honey. Like, they're just like, if you watch the documentary, these people are still like living like normal lives. They're not getting any notoriety from this more than like I don't even know, like, what is the equivalent now? Like TikTok shit? Like,
I guess, but like at the same time, there's no way of knowing. To them, making the newspaper was probably at the time pretty fucking cool. I mean,
but that's not enough to do this. No, let me put it this way. It's not enough for me to do this. If it's enough for someone else to do this, fine. But like, I also don't want to just paint everybody that does this and like that doesn't understand the consequences as a moron, though. Like,
fair. That's fair.
Because I think there's also that like stereotype of like the dumb hick. Because the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter where the people were in their house shooting at the aliens outside, they're essentially painted as drunk hillbillies shooting at owls. And yet when we interviewed one of the grandchildren of that family, I mean, it's one of those things where she's heard it before. And to me, it's like, it is unfair because like, people can't control when these things happen. If we say that these things are happening, right, it could happen to me and you. Two people who are very different with very different upbringings, very different backgrounds, just like it could happen to somebody who's rich or poor or anything else. Like, I feel like people who are of a certain class have less to lose. Someone who's like a professor at a university, who's in a serious academic, has a lot to lose if they say, I believe in aliens. Right?
That's fair. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right.
And I will say that a lot of my feelings are obviously based off of what I saw in the movie. It's really hard to separate the personas that they portrayed in the movie from who they must actually be. I have no reference for who these people really actually are.
I don't either. They're not. Yeah.
That I think is a bit of a block for me. It, like, obviously there's tons of footage of, Travis telling his story. But is there a lot of footage of everybody else, or did they just want nothing to do with it after a while? And if that's the case, that sort of leaves you to that type of scrutiny, which, I mean, isn't fair, especially if you want to distance yourself from it. But, not speaking out about your side of the story in a modern context, it's hard to say whether or not, what that integrity actually is. And for me personally, I will continue to see this group of, 5 people, everybody other than Travis, as their personas in the movie because I have nothing else to go off of.
And that's fair. I think the question that I ultimately have is, and this is the thing that like I do have a hard time wrapping my head around, so maybe you can help me. Why would 5 people willingly make up a story that gets them questioned for somebody's murder?
And that's a good point.
Like that's my point here. Like, it's a true crime story that intersects with an alien story, because we haven't even gotten to the Travis alien thing yet, which is much more exciting in the movie than it is in the stories he tells. It's very not pedestrian, because again, being abducted by aliens is not in any shape, form, or fashion pedestrian, but it's not the harrowing piece of adventure horror filmography or film that we get to see in the movie, which is, even now, it's very scary. It's it's effective. It's effective.
Yeah, but provocative, if you will.
The question becomes, you have 5 people in a car who, if they return to town without one of them, they're going to be the first people that are asked, where is this guy? Why would they make that up only to have an entire town assume that they're fucking murderers? And or is it worse to be a person covering up for a murderer? Because that's essentially what it is one of them killed him and they all covered it up, or they all killed him and they're all covering it up. But the question I've had this whole time is, why the fuck would anybody make that up? And if they're not making it up, then he got fucking abducted by aliens. Like,
question. If the LSD angle, let's explore it for a second. If that's to be, let's say for a second that it is known for a fact that indisputable that the group partakes in LSD, if not even one of them deals in LSD. And let's say that Travis had a bad trip and ran. Would they then, if they couldn't find, just hear me out.
I'm listening.
And if they could, I just saw your expression. Like, no, wait.
I'm listening.
They couldn't find him. They returned to town. They can't say, one of our friends got super high off of LSD and just booked it, because that puts them all under scrutiny of having an illegal substance. Why
What was there verifiable fact that they were all doing it, or was it just him? Because like if it's just him, they could all just be like, that fucking guy did LSD and ran off into the woods. Like in my mind,
one of them was a dealer though.
Right, but one of them being a dealer doesn't mean that guy is smoking or using that guy's stuff either. Like that's an assumption. I'll give you that. I mean, yeah, he's dealing one thing and the other guy's using it. So, and they're all in the same town and they all are on the same logging crew. So yes, there's a possibility, and a pretty high one, that might be the case. But again,
what would the consequences have been, though? If let's say that they got caught for dealing LSD, one of them got caught for dealing LSD, which meant that they all went down. What would that consequence at that time, what would that have been? Would they have gone to jail? Would that have ruined their lives? Like, because if so, that's a pretty decent incentive.
But again, like, why wouldn't they just say, like, this guy did LSD? He was the one doing it. Like,
because maybe they were afraid. I'm sure LSD or even laced LSD would cause symptoms of paranoia. And maybe they were terrified that if they told the truth, even if it was just what happened to Travis, Travis would come clean about all of it, and all of them would go down for it. I don't want to rule that out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fear of being abducted by the police and thrown in a prison cell because you did an illegal drug is pretty scary.
Right? Especially because they were in their mid to late 20s, correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're dudes. They're dudes with a lot of life left to live, regardless of their age, right? None of these are old guys. They're old guys. Travis is an old guy now.
I don't want to rule out the idea that they could have been covering for several things, but one of them could have been specifically so they wouldn't all go down for LSD use and potentially dealing it.
I don't understand why, if that's the case, why they don't just say he wandered off in the night. Like, they woke up and he was gone. Like, that's what I don't like. That's what they never said. They always said he got abducted by he got abducted by aliens. Like, that's what I don't get. Like, any of these, you could still lie out of that position that you're in, couldn't you? Couldn't you just be like, we woke up the next morning and he was fucking gone, and he was gone. Like, let me ask you something. Take him getting abducted out of this, right? And let's just say they woke up one morning and he was just fucking gone. And a wild animal came in the night and killed him, type thing, right? Which can happen. I mean, they're out in the fucking woods. I don't know if there's an animal big enough to kill someone, but a sleeping person, maybe. But say he got dragged out into the night, and it's not that there's no evidence, but again, you have, like you said, 5 guys in the woods, 6 dudes, and some of them are fucking maybe weird or maybe have some priors. And this guy disappears and they can't unequivocally confirm that it's an animal. Is that any different?
I guess not. But at the same time, which one would have them suspected for murder more in their eyes before telling the story?
I feel like saying I got abducted by aliens is like, that's like a fucking joke answer, is it not? Like, nobody in their right mind would use that that's the problem I keep coming back to. Nobody in their right mind would use that as an answer.
But would anybody on a hallucinogenic drug use that answer?
If they saw the aliens, that's the thing. But then they would have to all have seen the same ones.
They could have gotten their stories straight together.
Do you think they got their stories straight? Do you think that's what this is? They passed lie detectors. All but one of them passed it with flying colors, and Alan Dallas passed it the first 2 of 3 times he did it.
How accurate were lie detector tests back then?
How accurate are lie detector tests now?
That's a great question. And
they're not permissible in court as evidence. They still aren't.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
and why are we bringing them up? I don't know. Like, we're perpetuating the problem by bringing them up, right? The problem of we don't like them and don't like talking about them, but we always bring them up because that's somehow, let me put it this way. For a certain group of people, that's a indicator that matters. Yes or no?
It makes me wonder, like, I've never had one done myself.
Right. Me either.
And I feel like that's an experience that I would want to have to test myself. And like, you see a lot of like celebrities doing them now for fun. And even then,
you don't like Pedro Pascal being asked if he thinks or what did they ask him? Do you know you're a heartthrob? And he goes, no. And then it's like, like lie. Like, what the fuck is the point of this? Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like it's something that you'd have to experience for yourself in order to know whether or not it's legit. And I myself have never experienced a lie detector test, so I couldn't tell you really if it's legit or not. And I feel like at that point, not even just doing it once, but like doing it like 10 times with different sets of questions. Like, and this was the stance that I took in general back when I was doing the other podcast with Arthur, when we were talking about anything that wasn't proven, I would often pitch ideas of like experiments that I feel like we could have possibly done if we had the means, that I wish people would be doing, or that there was documented evidence for. And maybe there is a study out there that has been conducted on the effectiveness of lie detector tests. If anything, I would be surprised if there hadn't been. But then again, you have to ask, what is the validity of said test? What was it? Who sponsored that test? It's like one of those things where you just kind of have to experience it for yourself. I don't know. I want to believe that, if they all passed a lie detector test, that meant that they were all telling the truth. But could you wholeheartedly say that?
I mean, again, like that's like you said, I don't know lie detectors well enough outside of what I know about them by doing research. I've never had one done to me. I'm with you. I would like to. Then maybe I feel like I could have a better personalized opinion about them, right?
Exactly.
How does it make me feel that those 5 dudes all passed lie detector tests? It means that something else is saying that the stories that they're telling, they believe. A lie detector test in my mind, like you could fool a lie detector test if you believe the lie, right? Like, I don't understand. How is that not like the way to fool the lie detector test is just believe the lie so implicitly that you could not convince yourself it's not true?
Which could be done if you had a shared hallucination via hallucinogenics. I'm just saying, like, it's not out of the question.
But why would they not murder though? Like, you're not going like murder. That's the problem here. Like, this is the thing they know if they don't come back with him that they're going to get accused of making him disappear. You've got, right? Like, are they assuming that? Put yourself in that shoe in that fucking weird car ride back to town where these 5 motherfuckers are in the car together. And again, take whether or not the aliens happened out of the equation. These 5 guys have to come up with a story. If it's not the story that actually happened, they have to fucking come up with some fake ass story to describe what this dude was doing. Why would aliens would not be at the top of my tongue, even if I did murder someone? If I had murdered him, that wouldn't be the story I use because it's too fantastic. Put that out in there. Like, what if let's say Travis Walton didn't die. He did die, but he didn't get abducted by aliens. They murdered his ass, right? Let's say for whatever reason, what happened in the quote unquote like belief of everybody outside of aliens happening this one time, because there are plenty of other cases of people going into the woods and disappearing or going on vacation and getting pushed off a fucking cruise ship. Like, opportunities do present themselves. People do take them. Let's go and play the scenario out. Like you said, play a scenario out. They go out. Alan Dallas kills Travis Walton. Okay. These 5 guys now 4 guys, I guess, have to cover up for Alan Dallas. Why would they? Why wouldn't they just say, this guy fucking did it? Like, that's my question here. Like, if that actually happened, they'd just be like, he did it. He killed him. He's the one who did it. Why would they cover up for him? Because that's what they thought was going on initially. They're like, well, the alien story is just a cover up because this guy killed him. It's like, why the fuck would they be covering up? Like, what would this guy, why would they cover up for him when they could just be like, we didn't do anything. This guy killed him. End of story.
Like, maybe he threatened them.
But they would get in more trouble by lying to the police than anything else. Like, there's 4 of them and 1 of him. It just kind of doesn't make sense. I'm not saying your things that you're getting, like, I
know
the drug stuff. I could totally get why they would cover that up, but why they would cover up if he like quote unquote murdered, like, there's no reason to lie. In my mind, if they lied, it's because it's something like the LSD thing. But again, like the lying is only to prevent them all going to jail, maybe. But again, Travis Walton comes back, so I don't think they're going to get in any kind of trouble.
But they didn't know that he was going to come back.
But they didn't know he was going to be dead either. Did they assume that if he wandered off, so let's play this out. He takes LSD and he disappears. They're going to tell the cops that he wandered off and did LSD. Why wouldn't they? If they don't know where he is, like, why wouldn't they just be like, we don't know where he is? Why would they be like, well, he disappears, fucking gone? Like, they could just be like, this is where we were. This is where he might be. Let's go look. It's not like they didn't go out and look. They went and looked. They couldn't find him.
At this point, I feel like either way could be equally plausible. And in my personal opinion, I mean, like I said, we haven't seen any interviews with that original crew. We don't know what kind of people they were. We don't know how honest these people were. We don't know how smart these people were and whether or not they perceived certain threats, or certain consequences worse than others. We don't know what was going through their minds. They could have been drunk. They could have been high. We don't know.
There were some of them in the documentary on Discovery Plus. Mike Rogers is interviewed on there, and I think one of the other guys. So they're there, and they seem just like normal people. They don't seem like there's any like pretense. They're just like, again, like that's the thing. For all intents and purposes, these guys had one weird experience that would probably be a rather mundane life otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing about all of this. It's like Travis Walton and what happened to him. This guy had a normal life. Like, watch the movie, listen to him talking, listen to him now. Like, this guy is not sitting on like a fucking mountain of money. I don't know what the residuals for Fire in the Sky are, but they're not Halloween Kills levels. They're not Batman residuals. He maybe is getting a couple $1,000s a year from the book, a couple $1,000s a year from the movie. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, like, these people, that they had one experience in their lives that they can't understand or explain. But other than that, they're just normal fucking people. And that's like really hard to, in my mind, grapple with, because a lot of this, it's like, well, these are special. And like, that's one thing Travis Walton has never said. He's like, I was special, or they picked me specifically. And that's something interesting about his story that often crops up in these alien narratives. It's like, oh, they visited me a lot. Like Whitley Strieber with Communion. It's like, they've been visiting me since I was a child. And it's like, well, if they're doing that, like, then you specifically have something that is bringing them to you that you offer to them or for them or whatever. Nothing I ever listened to that Travis Walton said made it seem like he felt like he was the reason that he was taken. He was just taken because, right?
So it's interesting that you say that, because from what I had found, he does know the reason why he was taken. And did that come up at all in the interviews that you saw?
I guess he didn't talk about it in the interviews that I saw.
So this might have been when I was watching that other podcast that Champy named. And I was also reading a lot of comments as well. But what I had found is that apparently, because as you said, the abduction itself in the alleged real life of what had happened in his true account was a lot more tame, because they weren't trying to probe or dissect him. In his opinion, he set off something in the ship that had caused that blast that we spoke about. Some sort of something fired a defense system, and that the aliens presumably rescued him and brought him back from the brink of death.
I did see that.
And so in that case, he does know why he was abducted. It was because they were trying to help him, because they felt bad for hurting him. They didn't mean to.
Right.
And he even said that he regrets the way that he had acted. Obviously, he was scared, but that he was the one that was hostile, that they were never hostile. And I think that that's really important to note in terms of just his story, something that I think adds credibility. I think that makes a lot of sense. After watching the movie, that makes so much more sense to me. I feel like a lot of the Hollywood movies, especially, Hollywood movies that are meant to be horror-esque, like to portray, aliens as horrible, horrific, unfeeling beings, and that we're just puppets to them. We're just, we're nothing to them. They're just curious, and they're going to dissect us the same way we would dissect a frog in biology. And I think it makes so much more sense that wouldn't be the case. If they're coming out of their way to come and visit us, and they have that advanced technology to do so, I think a lot of people like to believe the same sentiment that, they evolved out of that fear response that we as humans have. I think that makes a lot of sense. If they're so much more advanced, why would they need to be afraid of us? Why would they need to be malicious towards us?
I want to clarify. I'm talking about someone who had been visited like multiple times and felt like the aliens were like called, and that's like a thing. Like, obviously, like we both know, like, I mean, you're right. Like, no, Travis Walton speaks about the thing you're talking about, but like, that's just by essentially like this all seems like an accident, right? Like, he went out and got accidentally like zapped, and they were like, well, shit. Like
clean up the mess.
Right. Like roadkill, like you hit an animal and you broke its leg, and it's like, well, I could take it somewhere to have it fixed. And this is the same thing. But like, he doesn't say like, well, I had been seeing aliens my whole life, and then one day I just happened to be like, there's none of that. But like, there are plenty of people who like, that's their whole thing. It's like, I was seeing this and the aliens visited me so many times, and I was a child the first, and like, that's a thing. And what's weird is like, there's none of that here. I know that, Philip J. Klass, who is one of the people that really didn't like this case and felt like this was a complete hoax. Like, I get it. He's a very well-respected UFO researcher, and he felt like there was a lot of discrepancies and all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, like, you're going to see discrepancies in a polygraph, but you're still going to trust that the polygraph telling them, like, there's discrepancies in the polygraph and it's poorly administered, but when it's administered correctly and it's lying, well, okay, great, perfect then. It's like, well, it's because you got the response that you wanted, that you're agreeing with it, and that's why you like it. And like, I have a problem with that, because for me, in a lot of ways, lie detectors are just confirmation biases. Like, if you think about it hard enough, you can manifest it the way you want it to. Like, maybe that's me just believing one thing, but like lie detector tests, like, sure, whatever. There's easier ways and better ways to go about getting that kind of information than lie detectors. People incriminate themselves a lot more obviously than that. And again, when it's not admissible in court, it doesn't fucking matter, period. But again, I come back to this idea of, why would five guys pretend that someone went missing in the woods when you know that when you come back, you're going to have to answer for, is he dead? And again, like, okay, here's the other thing. Even if he died and they were to blame, then they would lie. Like, if he was doing something stupid, or they didn't stop him, or he was doing something and they didn't help him and he died, like, they all got drunk, right? So say the six of them got drunk and then he died of alcohol poisoning. Yeah, they would be in big trouble. But again, then they would lie and say, well, the aliens took him, but then he wouldn't come back because he would be dead 6 feet underground and hiding in the Arizona woods somewhere. It's the him coming back part. And like, where was he? He doesn't know where he was, unless he was just hiding in a gas station somewhere.
I want to point out one other thing that I feel like, again, makes me feel very neutral, but I want to posit this as well. So apparently authorities, when he was discovered, they believed that at the very least, he thought he was telling the truth, but they thought it was the cause of, drugs, as I had said. But apparently when doing tests, there were no drugs found in his system. However, I looked up, how long does LSD last in your system? So what do you think? How long do you think LSD is traceable?
I guess the question I would have is, were they testing for LSD at that time to begin with? Because I would assume they were. If they were, it's probably 2 days, maybe. Like, is it 2 days?
So apparently in urine, it's 2 to 4 days. In blood, it is a mere 6 to 12 hours. However, in hair, up to 90 days, which is interesting. That's a very big jump. But I'm assuming if they're doing, a drug test, they're probably either doing urine or blood. They're probably not, a small town like this probably does not have the facilities to go and test hair. That's an assumption, but I think it's safe to say. That being said, if he took LSD 5 days ago, it would be out of his system by the time he returned, and maybe he left and waited to make sure that it was all gone, that it worked its way out of his system. Like when they say like, oh, authorities, tested him and all the drug tests came back negative. It's like, well, it doesn't last in your system that long. So like I said, it left me feeling very neutral learning this information. If it had said LSD lasts, and can be traceable in a blood test for a week, then I would have been like, oh shit. Or, or it lasts in your urine for 2 weeks. Like that would have made me feel different. But the fact that it's like, it just fits in the window of 5 days is interesting, don't you think?
I can, yeah. I mean, I'm not. If it wasn't the UFOs, then it's in my mind. It's this. That's the only other explanation, because the ramifications. I could be convinced that the ramifications would be bad enough. In my mind, it's like, I'll take whatever punishment the drugs have, because it's better than being like, our friend got abducted by aliens. Yeah, he fucking did, and now you're going to prison. Like that. I don't want to go to. You're going to go to prison for a lot longer for your friend being fucking dead from a bad acid trip than your friend disappearing and you claiming that he got fucking abducted by aliens. I don't know. It's criminal negligence if he took a bad trip and died. It's murder if he disappears and it's aliens and he never comes back. What would have happened if he never came back is my question. Those fucking guys are going to be in prison, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what then? What? So what do we believe then?
He got abducted and they just kept him. Not every abduction story necessarily ends with, and they came back.
How many of those stories are there?
I don't know.
That's that would be an episode worth doing, because that's got to be a thing. People who go missing, right? Because that's not just Fox Mulder's sister in the X-Files. I mean, that's the most famous pop culture version, but that's got to be a thing that's happened. People went missing with the aliens and never came back. Not like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'm going with them willingly because I want to learn. It's no, the aliens took my husband and he never came back. That's got to be a thing, isn't it?
And so, again, if we're saying why this story, if they really thought that he had run off and he could have offed himself and they didn't want to be responsible at all, and they wanted to wash their hands of them, and they decided he was abducted by aliens, that doesn't necessarily mean, and by the way, he'll be back in 5 days. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think that they would have said that in the assumption that he would have returned. If anything, I think abducted by aliens, I feel like it's more likely that you're not ever going to be seen again. Just, oh, we finished our probe, off you go.
I'm with you. I'm with you. And again, that's the other thing here that, October 20th, 1975, so less than a month before this happened, there's an NBC network special called The UFO Incident, which stars James Earl Jones, of all people, where it's a recreation of the Betty and Barney Hill incident, where Betty and Barney Hill were abducted by aliens and they figured it out after the fact through regression hypnosis. So that was on TV less than a month before all this happened. So that's he just made it up and he was just a goofing and he was making a laugher. But again, why would 5 people make that up so that they could be fucking on the hook for somebody's murder? Nobody would willingly make themselves a fucking murder suspect unless they're completely out of their goddamn minds. No serial killer's even doing that. No serial killer is unless we're talking fictional serial killers, no real serial killer. John Wayne Gacy wasn't hey, I'm a serial killer and I want you to figure out how I'm doing it. That's what we're talking about here. It's oh, well, it's there's none of that here. You would not do that. And it's just, again, that's the whole thing I have a really hard time wrapping my head around, because Travis Walton's explanation of the abduction is they were short and they were bald and it looked like a hospital, but an alien hospital. It's just and it's very pedestrian. The story that he tells is very pedestrian compared to the story of the movie, obviously. But the story I was expecting him to tell was very
much more fantastical than it was.
Which in my mind comes back to another question of, if you're going to make this up, why wouldn't we
go all the way?
Well, are we of two minds that if you go all the way, then you seem like more of a bullshitter? Is that it?
I don't know.
Right? I'm of two minds. If I'm going to make this up, I'm going to go, I'm not going to say he didn't go far enough, because the guy said I got abducted by aliens, which again, you say that and you're oh, you're being serious. Like the moment you say that, I get it. But like, he just like, well, it's like the little short little, grays. And well, they were kind of, dressed up. And then there was a guy and this guy helped me out. And then
I remember reading about that as well.
Yeah.
That apparently there was like a humanoid figure.
Right. Like just like a dude walking around on the ship with like a helmet on. Like,
so apparently what some people think, because I had also heard that rather than one humanoid figure, there were 3 humanoid figures, which would have been the same amount of, the aliens that were helping him. And since he was so hostile towards, their alien form, some people theorize that they had transformed in some way, that they, shape-shifted into more humanoid figures to put him at ease.
Why not just be humans then?
They didn't know. They're like, I can
Close
be
enough.
myself around you.
Close enough without going over. We'll look like short little humans.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something. And here's an interesting. I'll give you a little piece here. How's this?
Uh-huh.
So I see a human wearing a helmet. Okay. So let's say he's tripping balls. Okay. This guy's flying high. He's chasing the white dragon on LSD, whatever. Chasing the white dragon's heroin. Let's say he's on Earth terrestrially. Where are people wearing helmets in 1975?
Motorcyclists.
Right. So like if this dude's tripping and this person in a helmet takes him away and helps him get away, maybe he's tripping and he's wandering around and wandering into places he shouldn't be. Because again, he gets found in like a gas station. Mm-hmm. So gas station, he's calling from a gas station phone booth when he's found 5 days later.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's wandering around and he's tripping balls so fucking hard he thinks that a motorcyclist wearing a helmet is an alien.
Mm-hmm.
Is that believable? Is that believable to you?
I think so.
Is that more or less unbelievable than there were aliens and there was a humanoid alien with a helmet on in their spaceship? That's the question, though.
It's interesting because you reminded me of something, which was in college. I had a friend in my major who was telling me how the night before she had found these 2 guys that were just absolutely tripping balls, having a horrible, horrible trip. And she had like offered to help them, and they would not stop saying like, "You're an angel," but like she was like, but it sounded like they meant it, like more than just like, "Oh, you're so kind, thank you," but just like, "You are a literal angel. You are saving us." Like, and so I feel like if you're tripping hard enough, you believe just about anything. I've never been on a hallucinogenic. I could not tell you.
Me either. I mean, that's the other problem. It's like the lie detector thing. And like, I would love to do hallucinogenics in a controlled environment where I'm not going to hurt myself or anybody else. And I would like to know what that's like, just so I can have a baseline, like a microdose of psilocybin. Like, that's what I'm talking about, just to feel what it feels like. Because I'm a user of some things, and those things aren't hallucinogenic in enough of a potency to matter. So, and even if it is, it's not lucid hallucinations. It's like I close my eyes and I see stuff. Like, so it just makes your dreams a little bit more vivid. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Like, there are some people that can't handle that, and I totally get it, but like, it's still not like I'm opening my eyes and I'm seeing things. Like, that's what we're talking about here. It's like, I can't go to sleep and escape it because it's while I'm awake. And so I don't know what that's like you just said, neither do you. So again, like, in my mind, it's like, is that movie logic? Is that how this works? Or is this actually how this works? Like, again, I have friends that have microdosed with psilocybin and other things, and they've said it's been immensely helpful. So it can't seem like necessarily a bad thing. And if you listen to James Renner, who was on a couple episodes back, talk about it, he talks about his kind of experience with psilocybin, and it seems like a helpful experience. So I don't know, like, this is maybe, like, I don't know, like, I'm just thinking, like, when he talks about a guy with a helmet on, that's like another weird thing in all of this, right? Because like a humanoid guy who's wearing a helmet, like,
yeah,
why?
I'm curious. You mentioned early on in this episode that you would love to interview Travis yourself. Would you ask him if he uses or used hallucinogenics at that time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would have to.
Right?
I would have to ask him. And if he said yeah, like, here's the thing though, if he said yes, that would not change my beliefs on what happened. Because I genuinely believe he was fucking abducted. Like, I'll put it to you straight. You know what? He might do hallucinogens. He might be a liar, but it's
Boy Who Cried Wolf type thing.
I don't think it's I see where you're getting at, but in my mind, it's like, nah, I believe it. I don't know. Maybe I'm a sucker. Maybe I'm the sucker that the story is looking for. But there are plenty other people out there, and I have no money invested in this. I have no reason to believe this. It's not like I'm shilling any of his books. I'm saying go watch his movie or any of that.
All right.
Frankly, the movie was fine. It was kind of boring, but like it was not boring.
Until that one part that it was just straight up uncomfortable.
Right. And like the part where he's having to, dig out of the alien placenta, and then he gets essentially gang fucked by a bunch of aliens on a table, and it's horrifying, but that's not what happened. And like in a lot of ways, like the grand majority of the public thinking that's what happened doesn't help his story seem credible when the surface level people who know his story can only equate it to a movie telling his story that was like hyper fictionalized for the sake of entertainment. There's also that here. I mean, that's neither here nor there. Hollywood loves a good story, but they love a good story that they can embellish and zhuzh up even more. And that's what they did with his story. I think the film's actually interesting because it tells the story in a way where it's like, did these guys murder this guy? Because we don't see a lot of the pre-Travis stuff at all. It's all of like, where is he? The movie takes place in those 5 days, essentially, in between when he disappears and when he comes back. And that's kind of an interesting conceit for that movie, because it makes Travis getting abducted. Like we see it, it's literally 3 minutes at the end of the movie. Like movie's an hour and 40 minutes and it's 3 minutes. And the movie, say what you will, it's not what I was expecting, but I was still more or less entertained. And it's a movie about, again, a weird thing that happened that a lot of people in the 70s were really intrigued by.
I want to also throw 2 other little bits of potential evidence into the ring. And again, circumstantial. But 2 things, again, that I had seen during my research. One is that UFO investigators did eventually return to the site and found that the area had high levels of residual magnetism.
And in the documentary I watched, they go back and they look at the trees.
I was going to bring that up. Yes.
And okay, go right ahead then.
So I'm not going to
beat you to it.
I didn't have a basis for this. So it's interesting that you said that it's in the documentary. So what I apparently had seen, so trees in the area were producing wood fiber 36 times faster than the normal rate. And apparently this was only on the sides of the tree that were facing where the craft was, not on the opposite side. That is very fascinating. So are you saying that in the documentary, they went back and more or less proved that?
I mean, they're there and they're looking at the trees and he's showing the tree rings. It's a researcher who worked with Travis Walton in like the 2010s, like in the last 10 years, he worked with him. And like they talk about the tree rings and like, they talk about it and that's the thing. Like, okay, so how do we even explain that? Like what explanation is there that makes that make sense? Along with any of the things we've been talking about, because how does these dudes taking LSD make the trees grow faster?
That is probably the best evidence so far, in my opinion.
And that's the weird stuff, right? Those are the things that are hard to ignore. Those are the sharp edges that sometimes poke out of these things, where it's like, if I follow that sharp edge down, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole because it's essentially just a ramp into the center of the problem. And sometimes it's easily explainable. And it's just like, well, it's the guy in Dealey Plaza with the umbrella on the day JFK got shot. He was just a guy with an umbrella standing in Dealey Plaza. That's just what happened. He just had an umbrella. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't a CIA plant. Sometimes the shittiest explanation is it just was coincidence and happenstance. That's not this. Like, that's not this.
Say what would have caused that? Like, what about the craft would have caused a rapid growth rate? Did they have
radiation?
Radiation?
I mean, that's kind of always the answer, right? It's some sort of whatever they're using to propulsion for these spacecraft gives off some sort of radioactive beam or radiation beam or beam of some kind. And I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, if they're looking at this and saying this is a weird phenomenon occurring in nature that we can't explain, that occurs here, but doesn't occur there, and this is where something weird may have happened. This, again, it's like, how does 5 dudes taking LSD make the trees grow faster?
That's a very good point. That is why I will remain on the fence.
But you're leaning towards him being abducted. I know you are, because it's.
I want to.
Right?
Because I want to.
It's such a, I don't feel a bone of maliciousness in Travis Walton as a person. Like, he just seems like a human being. Like, I got abducted by aliens. What do you want me to do? Like,
a lot of people in comment sections on some of the interviews that I'd seen through YouTube often mentioned meeting him in person at a convention and how he always just had this far away, distant sort of not quite there look to him. And I mean, that's not really something that you associate with somebody who hasn't had a traumatic experience, you know? And so I feel like that's also really fascinating. I do want to believe that he's telling the truth. I will forever be, at the very least, a partial skeptic. I think it's just a part of my brand at this point. But I'm not afraid of exploring the possibility of the occult, the metaphysical. I hope that there's more than what we understand. Why would we want this to be everything when there could be so much more out there?
I agree with that sentiment so hard. It's not even funny. If this is it, yikes, bro. Like, the shit that we get upset about, the things that we worry about, if this is truly it, fuck then. Like, for real, if there's no mystery in the world and there's no high weirdness in the world, then fuck. That's all I can say. Like, fuck it. Like, then this shit does suck this bad. And I've been wrong this whole time and trying to be optimistic, because in a lot of ways, believing in this stuff is just a brand of optimism. Like, I want to believe in weird things because I don't want to believe that the world is this fucking boring. And it's this terrible, and children die every day because they starve, and animals starve, and all this shitty shit happens all the time. And it does happen, but I would like to believe that there are some bright spots poking through of things that can't be explained, and positive things happening, and like miracles. Like, in a lot of ways, these things are just what would be ascribed in religion as miracles. It's just the unexplained. The unexplained and miracles are often the same thing. They really are. It's just one of them is overtly religious in its connotation. But we're talking about the same thing. And this is, I don't know, like, you could say that this is a miracle. It changed this man's life. But I don't know. Like, in Jordan Peele's Nope, they say, is there such thing as a bad miracle? And it's like, I think you might consider this that. Like, this guy got abducted by aliens, but it fucked him up, because it would fuck you up. Like, it would fuck you up irrevocably. Like, I don't know why anyone would think you get abducted by aliens and then you're just like, oh, I'm fine now. Like, no, it was verified to you that you are not the only being of sentience in the universe. That fucks you up. It fucks you up in a way that's like hard to even understand, because you can imagine having that information being more or less verified to you. But like, these fucking people are seeing it. They're sitting on a table, or they're sitting in a chair, or they're sitting in their bed, and something is coming into their room that is proving to them something that, again, until the moment it's not, you don't believe it either. Like, you believe it in as much as you can, but you know what I mean? Like, I believe in aliens, but if I die and I've never seen one, then I guess I believed in them and I never saw them. But there are people that believe in them and then see them and go, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Right. That's the thing here. It's just like, it's very hard to sit and go, well, yeah, he made this up and he's a millionaire now. It's like, no, he made this up and he's going the UFO circuit, and he's probably like, if this actually happened to him, he's fucking PTSD.
Yeah.
Forever. Like,
I also think it's important to note that you can believe in aliens, but not necessarily believe in this story. Or you can believe in aliens and not believe in abductions at all, or that aliens have ever made it here. Like, they don't have to hold hands. And I think that that's important to say, because I most definitely believe that there is something else out there. What I am on the fence about is whether or not they have made contact with us and whether or not Travis's story is true. That is, like I said, I want to believe. I really do. Why would I want to discount the story of this old troubled man?
Again, like, and he, like you've mentioned so many times, like he was in his 20s when he told this story. He's an elder, like not maybe elderly, but he's an older guy now. Like he could be my grandfather or your grandfather. And like, imagine like your grandfather sitting you down and going, kids, I have a story I want to tell you. And the crazy thing is, if I were to have kids, my father would have those stories. He's come on the show and he's talked about his experiences. And that in a lot of ways is why I believe these stories, because my dad has no reason to lie to me. My dad is the most trustworthy person that I know. So I know he's not making this shit up. And maybe Travis Walton's a liar, but that doesn't mean he lies about everything. And I don't know what you're a liar means. Like what it's a subjective. Oh, you lie all the time. Oh, all the time. What a great measurement of time. That is.
Well, that's why I brought up Boy Who Cried Wolf, where the whole thing is, you tell a bunch of lies, and when something is finally the truth, no one believes you.
Right. Look,
so again, you could be a pathological liar. That doesn't necessarily mean that you never tell the truth.
Right. And, I think in my mind, it's interesting if that were the case. He is someone who is a liar, but ultimately, even though he is lying, him lying doesn't disallow what he has seen to be believed. I think, again, I don't know, like in my mind, Travis Walton's story there are parts of it that are hard to reconcile, like the trees, like the general weird nature phenomenon going on, like the fact that 5 people incriminating themselves about murdering someone is a hard pill for me to swallow. But again, if you could get yourself there mentally, fine. You know what? I believe it. I couldn't get there is more my point. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, this is one of the more well-known close encounters. But I think also to your point, like, I think we do need to kind of reinforce to people like this is separate from believing in aliens, because this is the human element. The moment we encounter aliens and we're interacting with them, human beings are part of this. And we, like you said, I do agree, human beings can't be trusted, like for the most part. So like, I agree, like we should always be going into these scenarios with a healthy dose of skepticism, because you can make money off these things. But I think people are making money off of things more innocuous than this. And that's maybe the less exciting thing. Like, this is fleeting fame. This is not Kardashian fame. This is not like that. It's just not lasting fame. And if you really want to be known as the guy who got abducted by aliens, what cachet does that give you? Now, it gives you cachet with a certain group of people at a certain time in a certain place, which if you always wanted to be the alien guy, I guess you got abducted by aliens is a pretty good story to tell, to get a bunch of people to invite you to their UFO convention without you having to buy a ticket. But like, what kind of a fucking perk is that to then be also known as the person who said they were abducted by aliens? Because yes, people are going to believe in you, but more people are going to look at you and go, were you really? And we're still not there. Even if more people believe in aliens now than they ever have, which I think is the case, you would still get looked at by most people like side eye if you said, I was abducted by aliens. If you actually did that in a group of people, people would question your sanity now, even now, with belief in aliens as high as it is.
Agreed. I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's one thing to listen to scientists and people that say that they have worked at, Area 51 and saying like, I have seen something and we have seen a craft. And like, it's one thing to believe in that being, the potential validity of those statements. It's a whole other thing to be like, I have been abducted by aliens. It's like, you?
That's the thing. This is just like a dude. He's just like a dude. Like if he walked up to him on the street and said hello, you'd be like, you got abducted by aliens. Yeah, right. I mean, right. and that's the thing. Like there's nothing about him that would lead me to believe that that again, like he got such a monumental amount of fame and notoriety out of this that was why he did it. It's just like you get branded as the guy who got abducted by aliens, and like branded is the term I would use.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of job do you get after that? What's your career trajectory?
That's my point. That's my point. Like I get the whole argument of like, oh, you become rich and famous, but
will you?
Right. None of these people really are. If at most they write a book and maybe 2 or 3 or a movie, but like not like Travis Walton's part of the national conversation right now. Like these brought back into the national conversation by something like Discovery Plus, because they're always looking to dredge up some old stories to tell in a new format, which I'm totally game for, because it brings notoriety to these kinds of stories. But again, nobody is sitting and pounding on Travis Walton's door, which is my point of like, it's not like he's a multi-millionaire now because of this. He's probably better off than he might have been. Maybe. Again, like, is a working guy going out and working. Like, again, he wasn't abducted off his fucking couch while he was eating potato chips. He was abducted while he was working a hard, dangerous job where people die all the time. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. Like you said, I would like to believe, and I think I'm further over the fence into the belief. But again, what's to say it's not just a bunch of dudes doing drugs in the woods? I'm not there, but I see how you can get there, and I totally get it. So my question to you, potentially a wrap-up question, is on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being bullshit. All of this is bullshit. This is stupid. Travis is a liar, etc. 10 being I wholeheartedly, without a doubt, in my mind, believe Travis's story. He is telling the truth. Where on that scale do you fall? I think a 7 or an 8.
7 or an 8. I'm
like 7.5, 8. Like I'm right there. Because again, like there are things that stick out in the belief direction, and there are things that stick out in the maybe there's something else going on direction. And there's things that stick out in both direction. It's just, I think for me, they stick out in this direction, the belief direction, just a little bit more. Like the things with the trees, like that's hard to explain unless it's just, this is a weird nature thing.
I would say I at most am a 6. I can't help it.
It's more than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah?
Yeah. I thought you were going to say like 4.
Nah, I was thinking
you're over the hump of belief here.
I think so. He seems like a genuine person. He does.
Yeah. Like that's, and for me, like, I'm not saying that that's like a huge indicator of anything, but the gut test is still a thing. Like in my gut, like I don't immediately get like my antennae don't go up immediately, you know, and there are plenty of people where it's like, oh, okay, like the guy who found the alien autopsy video, like your antennae are up immediately when he's like, I found it I bought it from a British guy who said he got it from here. And it's like, whoa, like what? You don't even have a fucking paper trail for this thing you're trying to get me to believe in? Like this, it's at least like, there's none of that. It's like he disappeared for 5 days. That's incontrovertible. Where he went, if he was hiding or if he was abducted, he was gone for 5 days. Like there, no question of that. Like, I don't know. My antennae don't go up because again, there's some things here that just don't make sense and can't be explained any other way than the fantastical explanation that seems impossible, but maybe isn't.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What about you?
I think at this point, I feel like there are a lot of really interesting stories out there where there probably are a lot of consistencies to what he had been saying. And at the time that he had told this original story, was there a lot of that readily available? Potentially significantly less. I mean, at the very least, you could say significantly less than there is today. I think that there is a lot of merit. And it's enough to, as you said, have me be over the hump of belief. I am definitely more on the believer side than I am on the disbeliever side. So squarely at a 6.
And I think the movie is fine if you want to check the movie out.
The movie is, if you are into more of that like campy horror, true crime type, you know, more old school Hollywood-esque, like you're gonna love it. It's very much like that cult classic vibe. If you're into like weird shit, you're gonna enjoy it. I mean, it was definitely a trip. As somebody who enjoys horror, I will say that I'm not a huge fan of gore. There is light gore, I guess, in the abduction scene. And so if you're not a fan of that, you might want to close your eyes during that time. But other than that, if you're into that style of cinema, I think you'll enjoy this. It was definitely, as you said before, at the very least entertaining.
Firmly a film made in the 90s, looks and feels like a 90s movie. It was fine. I mean, again, it came out either pre-X-Files or right around the time of the X-Files. I feel like if it had come out a couple years later, it might have been tonally a little different, maybe a little bit more bombastic. It's a pretty grounded in reality movie outside of the abduction at the end, which again is played up so much because it wasn't particularly exciting, the real one. And yeah, it's not. But again, you're saying that someone getting abducted by aliens wasn't exciting enough. Like, do you hear what you're fucking saying? Like, do you hear yourselves? Like,
I was telling you that I kind of wished that the movie was going to be more documentary styled.
Right. Likewise.
And I think I would have appreciated his actual account much more than the dramatized Hollywood. But then again, that's just me. And I mean, like, if you're here for the sake of seeing a creepy alien horror movie, then that won't deliver. So
yeah, that box will not be checked at all. Unless you're okay with an hour and 40 minutes giving you 3 minutes of that, literally 3 minutes. So go watch Skinamarink if you're looking for something. Well, that's okay. Not a good not a good suggestion either. Don't listen to my suggestions.
Watch Skinamarink.
Yeah, but then it'll be like, well, I waited 40 minutes to be scared. And it's like, well, at least there was some scares that weren't just 3 minutes.
Yeah, but Skinamarink is so earned.
I know. Yeah, that's the thing. I will say, like, when they get to the abduction, it's earned. It's just, it kind of sucks knowing what we know now that it's like so played up. It's like, well,
agreed.
What's the point of this then?
Absolutely. Why am I here?
Right. Like, him getting abducted by aliens is horrifying. Like, I don't care what they did to him. Like, whatever they did to him is going to be pretty horrifying on its own.
Doesn't matter.
But like, he was abducted by aliens. Like, why is that? It's like, yeah, like it'd be someone being like abducted by Bigfoot. And it's like, well, Bigfoot didn't, I don't know, turn me into their forest bride. It's like, well, in this movie, we have to because that's more entertaining. And it's like, I got abducted by Bigfoot. How is that not enough? So, but I'm glad we watched this together. This was it was fun. Maybe the next thing we do, if we do another one of these, it'll be a little bit more of a fun watch, so we can have a chortle along with it. Not that this wasn't chortle worthy, but it was.
The beginning was very chortle worthy.
Yeah, well,
it was very campy at the beginning.
There are some Jersey actors doing like fucking Southern accents that is very bad.
The beginning and the end, I think, were the campiest. The middle was pretty even, you know?
Yeah, again, it's more a story about his friends and their lives falling apart because he got abducted by aliens. The alien stuff, it's like, you could take it out of the movie. Like, it's not inconsequential, but if you go like Emma said, if you're here for the alien horror movie, go watch Alien. Go watch anything else, because this is like, you're not going to be satisfied. But if you're looking for a story about someone who had something happen to them that they maybe can't explain, then this is and you want to see how it affected them in their lives, then this is the story for you. And Travis Walton's story, I think, again, there's that documentary on Discovery Plus that's also totally worth checking out. So if you want to see Travis Walton giving the story in his own words in present day, more or less, and he also I think they find some like interview footage from him from the BBC from like the mid 80s where he's telling the story. So that's, if you want to see the stuff that Emma wished that the movie was, and I'm totally with her, go check that out on Discovery Plus. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Until the next time we do one of these, you can find Emma and I over at weirdingwaymedia.com, where we do this show every week. Sometimes Emma's not here, but I'm always here, and Emma's not here by choice. It's just sometimes Emma's not on the recordings.
The schedule forbids me.
You're right. Is that what it is? But yeah, you can find all of us over at Weirding Way Media, where we do this show and so many other shows weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, you name it. You can find it at Weirding Way Media. As for this show, scarystorieswetell.com, Scary Stories WT on social media, but that shit sucks. Sure does. And Twitter's going further down the hole as we speak. At some point, we won't even have to mention it because it'll be gone, but we're not there yet. Week
For
20.
now, hide your bookmarks.
Okay, great. Good. And yeah, as for the people who put their hard time and sweat into this show, Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge provide the album artwork. You can find Maggie over at Dolan Museum, and Alex Malnack of Blondo provides the music for the show. You can find him kicking around the Midwest with his band Blondo, or on Spotify. Just search Blondo. And as always, we'll let our good friend, the former host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.